Bob from Hauptwerk Hardware, and today we're down at Three Counties Organs in Somerset with Martin, the owner. Martin's kindly offered to let us use this instrument to answer a question which comes up almost daily, and that is, can I use a self-contained organ to control Hauptwerk installation running on a computer? Now, Martin's not only the owner of the business here, but he's also a local organist who plays in churches. So, Martin, from an organist perspective, why would you want to connect Hauptwerk to an instrument like this?
Two main reasons really. Either you're dissatisfied with the sound the organ makes, or you just want to experiment with all the wonderful things you can do with Hauptwerk.
Okay, that's great. So, assuming that you want to go ahead and connect this to a computer, what do you actually need to do that with? How does that work?
Primarily you need a thing called a Midi interface, one of these. You can see on one end is a little box with a USB plug, and the other ends, two 5-pin DIN plugs. This end you plug into the USB port on your computer, and these two go into the Midi ports on your organ.
Perfect. So, are the Midi ports on an organ always in the same place, and where would you find them? What are you actually looking for? Well, presumably the round hole that fits those.
You're looking for a round hole that fits these, yes.
Okay.
And you'll find them usually on the back panel of the organ, and unusually on this particular organ they're underneath the keyboards at the right hand end.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think what we should do now then is to actually do what we've said, plug this into a computer, and we'll have a look and see how that works.
Yep.
Okay, so here we've got a computer system running Windows 10 with a touchscreen monitor and two little desktop speakers. So Martin, if you'd like to plug in the USB MIDI interface. So Windows lets us know that that's done. So the other end of the cable that you've got here, we've got these two plugs. One is marked in and one is marked out. Presumably the out is the one that's going to take the signals coming out of the organ, or do they kind of cross over? How does that bit of it work?
The out is MIDI out from the computer, so this goes to MIDI in on the organ, and the in is MIDI in to the computer and therefore goes to MIDI out on the organ.
Okay, that's great. Brilliant. So let's see if we can get these plugged in to that nicely accessible part underneath the organ.
Okay. So if we look under here, conveniently given us some labels, there's the MIDI sockets, MIDI in and MIDI out. So we take the plug labelled out and plug it into MIDI in, and vice versa, plug labelled in to MIDI out. So the MIDI comes out of the organ into the computer via the interface.
That's great, that all makes sense. So just another question that's kind of immediately pops into my mind when you do that. I'm guessing that you can do it the other way around as well. So you can take MIDI out from the computer into the organ. So you could play that organ via MIDI if you had some MIDI files and some playing software on the computer.
Yes, you could.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good to know. Great. As you can see, the MIDI interface that's plugged into the computer here has got a little blue light on it. And if I get Martin to press some keys on the organ, you can see that there's a red light flashing as he presses the keys. And that lets us know that the whole thing's working properly. Now, Martin, what should somebody do if they've plugged it in like that and you find that the little red light or whatever colour it might be on your interface isn't working? How do we kind of fault find this?
Couple of options really. Most MIDI interfaces, the 5-pin plugs are labelled as I showed you earlier in the video. Very occasionally they're the other way around. So the first thing to do will be to swap the plugs around. You won't do any harm. Swap the plugs around, see if that works. Another problem may be that your particular organ may have some means of switching off the MIDI, and therefore there's no MIDI coming out. So what you would then need to do is to refer to the user's manual for that organ and turn the MIDI back on again.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so now we're going to look at how to set up the interface we've just plugged in with Hauptwerk so that we can control our organ.
So, we go to the Hauptwerk icon, click it. Now we've got this screen up because it's looking for a Hauptwerk dongle. This is version 4 of Hauptwerk, and we're not going to use a dongle, so we're going to skip that. It will be if I can press it. Right. And we're going to use the free edition. Again, I remind you, this is version 4. There's no free edition in version 5. Now, the first thing we can do is check that Hauptwerk knows that we've got that USB interface. If you go to General Settings on the top menu there, and Midi ports, you can see there it says USB MIDI interface. You need to make sure that that box there that says console MIDI in is ticked. It probably will be because Hauptwerk will just recognise it anyway. But if it isn't, tick it and say OK at the bottom here. So now we'll load an organ. I'll load the St Anne's Moseley set. There it is. Now what we need to do is to configure the organ controls, that is the organ console controls, to the Hauptwerk organ itself. So we'll start with the swell keyboard. So you can right click on that, or in our case a long touch on the touch screen, and the top option is auto detect MIDI blah blah blah. Click that and follow the instructions. You've got to press the lowest key on the keyboard and then the highest key on the keyboard. You can ignore the second part, press it as gently as hard as possible because we're not using velocity. So here we go. So I'll press the lowest key and I'll press the highest key, and you'll notice that the box here that says done has now been highlighted. So press that. If you want to make sure it works, just press a few keys. Here comes middle C. You can see the keys moving on the screen. There we are. So that's okay. Now we do the same thing for the great keyboard. So right click or a long touch. If I get this right in a minute, sorry. There we are. Auto detect MIDI. Same again. Lowest key, highest key. There you saw the done button highlight. Like that. And we can do the same for the pedals. Auto detect. And we have lowest key and highest key. Done. So if I now press a pedal, you'll be able to see pedals moving, and on the great keyboard, if I run my hand down, you can see the keys moving. So we now know that that's all working correctly. And in fact, if you just touch a couple of stops on here and play a few notes, you will hear something. So we're going to look now at how you can operate these stops on the Hauptwerk screen from the stop tabs or the draw stops, whatever you've got on your organ. Now what I've done with this, if you see here, if I just choose some stops on the grate, just a random handful, no sound because I've turned the volume right down, because we don't want to hear what this organ is producing, we want to hear what Hauptwerk is producing. Now, like most organs, on the great organ on Hauptwerk you have a great open diapason. On here we have an open diapason, 8 foot. So what we're going to do is to get the open diapason 8 stop tab to operate its corresponding stop knob in Hauptwerk. So to do that, we go back to the Hauptwerk console and we'll go for the open diapason large 8. So you set this up in exactly the same way as you set the keyboards. You right click on it, or a long touch if it's a touch screen, Auto detect MIDI trigger settings. There we are. You read the instructions, turn the switch on and then off again, once only. That switch it's talking about is the one on the organ. So open diapason 8, we switch it on and we switch it off. And we can see that the done box is highlighted. Touch that. Now we should be able to operate the stop.
Yep.
So that's how you set up a stop, and to prove it works, you can to set up pistons, you operate in exactly the same way. So you just touch the piston you want, auto detect MIDI settings, then you press the piston you require on your organ console. Now unfortunately we can't do that on this organ because, in common with a lot of other organs of a certain age, there's no MIDI connection to the pistons. However, it all works in exactly the same way. And the same thing applies to the expression pedals on this organ. They're not connected to MIDI. But to set those up, if you had a MIDI connection, just right click or long press, auto detect, and follow the instructions. It's as simple as that. We finished setting up Hauptwerk. I'm going to give you a little demonstration now of what it sounds like now we've set it up, and you'll probably be able to see the keys moving on a later part of the video. I've unplugged the audio output from the computer from the little speaker stood next to it, and I've plugged it into the auxiliary audio inputs on this organ, which most organs will have, so that we can hear the sound through the organ's amplification and speaker system. And here's a well-known hymn tune just to see what it sounds like.
Well, thanks for that demonstration, Martin. I hope some people will find that helpful and be able to use their organs without having to go and buy a whole bunch of stuff to try out virtual organs.
Pleasure.
So thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. If you have found it helpful, don't forget, please click the like button and share. And also there's going to be a lot of exciting things happening from my Hauptwerk side of things with new hardware devices that are going to be becoming available as the year goes on. So if you want to find out about those, there'll be lots of videos coming about those. Click the subscribe button and click the bell to make sure that you get notified that they're coming. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope you found it helpful.